everyone, and welcome to Painting Crafty. Today's video, I'm going to be showing you how I created this beachy Christmas style flamingo out of using something simple like a Chinette plate, a little bit of watercolor paper to paint on, and then a few little fun beachy finds. Today, I'm a part of a YouTube collaboration called Christmas in July, and we do have two hosts. We have Krista with Krista's Crafty Life and Brenda from Rustic and Lace DIY. You're going to find the links to their channels inside of my description box, as well as the playlist for all of the other talented creators for today's event. You're definitely going to want to take some time and watch it, because with this many creatives, I'm sure you're going to find something you're going to want to make. I'm going to start my video out today talking about tracing and not drawing. Normally on my channel, I teach a lot of drawing and watercolor, acrylics, and mixed media. I like all the nice fun things too. But today I'm going to be talking a little bit about tracing. First of all, I did start out with a sketch, but I'm going to be showing you how I use my tracer to be able to create the image for my painting. For those of you who might like to have a little help on drawing, you can always go over to my Ko-fi page. It's rather like a Patreon page. That's where I host my subscription there, where you can get all of the line drawings for all of the drawings that I do on YouTube. Not everyone likes to draw, and it's okay to use a tracer or even have a reference. I also include a reference there too. I like drawing from a reference, so I'm sure you wouldn't mind either. So this is my tracer. I'm going to be showing you how I use a light box to be able to create this, make a quick, simple job of creating the image, and then jumping right on into the painting. Up first was to create my image for my Christmas flamingo. I wanted to use these Chinette plates because I love the shape. So I went ahead and I drew the image right on my plate. But because the Chinette plates have an embossed logo in the middle, I had to figure out a surface that I wanted to actually do the painting on. So I chose to use watercolor paper for the painted surface. So here I'm using some deli paper. I'm going to push it into the edges, and then I'm going to be using a pen to be able to crease it even a little bit more. I'm going to use this template to cut the watercolor paper to draw my image on. After I have my template cut out, I went ahead and used some washi tape to be able to apply it to 140-pound watercolor paper. The watercolor paper is durable enough to be able to withstand using the acrylic paint on it. So it's going to work perfectly to cover up that branding of the Chinette in the middle of my paper plate. A light box is the perfect tool to create a transfer from a line drawing. All you have to do is put your line drawing down, turn your light on, and then lay your paper on top. It's bright enough to even shine through this watercolor paper. Line drawings and transfer are a perfect solution to make a quick job of drawing, or if you just don't feel confident in drawing, it's a simple way to do it. Once I had my drawing all done, I wanted to double check to make sure that it fit inside of my paper plate just fine. So I double checked the sizing to make sure it was correct, and then I went ahead and I fixed it to the bottom using a spray glue. One of my favorites is the Gorilla spray glue. It's heavy duty, this should work well, the paper to the paper. Before I begin the painting process, I want to make sure I give my paper plenty of time to dry. I want that glue to be a nice tight bond. I'm going to be starting with the Golden's fluid color called Teal. I don't have a special or any kind of paint that I particularly like, but I do love this color by Golden. It's one of my favorites. I'm going to be using this color all over my image. I want to create an underpainting that's really going to make my colors on top pop. And I know I'm going to be using lots of pinks and oranges, bright colors, and this is a complementary color for that. So by putting that color on first, I'm going to have a nice bright colored surface to paint on. For this painting, I'm going to be using a block style painting. I'm picking up a double amount of colors, never just one, usually multiple colors on my paintbrush, and I'm blocking in those colors as I'm moving around my painting. For this style of painting, I like using an inexpensive brush with stiff bristles on it. By changing my hand multiple directions and having my brush well loaded with paint, I can get some interesting brush strokes when applying the paint. I'm using a lot of paint when I'm doing this. So when you're doing this style of painting, the block painting, you definitely want to load your brush, have multiple colors on there at the same time, turn your hand so you can create different textures as you create this painting look. Now I did change my brush another time here. This is probably the third brush I'm using. I decided I wanted to switch down to an angle brush so I could do in tighter areas. I could have a little bit more control, but I still want to keep this painting pretty loose. I've laid in kind of a medium shade of pink, and now I want to lay in a little bit of the orange and the yellows. So I have my brush loaded with orange and yellow and even a little bit of white on there too, but not a lot of white at this stage. I'm blocking in my beak, and the beak majority is white, but a good way to paint a white area is not to use really much white at all. You want to start with multiple colorations underneath. By painting white areas this way, you're going to have a lot more depth and interest in your white areas. This shade of pink that I'm putting on now is by Liquitex. It's one of my favorites. It's called Fluorescent Pink. And anytime I want to add a pop of color to my paintings, it's one of my go-to colors. So far you've seen me use craft paint, acrylic paints, and now I'm using some of the Nova color paint. It's a little bit more professional grade, but this orange color is another beauty, organic orange, and one of my favorites. I don't necessarily choose a paint because of the brand, but I choose it because of how it reacts and the color and the look I want in my painting. Orange can be one of those tricky colors where they can be dull or flat, and this particular orange always looks very dynamic in my painting. On my hat, I'm going to be using the Liquitex Basic Acrylics as well in the color Cadmium Red Deep Hue. I do like the basic paints because they have a medium body. Most of your craft paints are going to be a lot thinner, but this particular brand is going to have a little bit more body and be more of a medium consistency. I'm going to get different coverage, I'm going to have better brush strokes, I'm going to be seeing them more, and that's what I was going for in this painting. Loose and lots of lively brush strokes. My underpainting is helping me with this color of the red. Often reds can be very translucent and they don't cover very well, but by having that blue underpainting underneath there, I'm getting that color to layer really well, and the colors are just coming to life by having that medium shade when I'm starting. I'm going to be base coating in that fur from his hat, on the top of his hat and at the bottom to make the pom-pom in white, and adding more color in it just like I did his beak. Again, I don't want my white to be too white right away. So I'm going to be adding some shadowing in with some warm colors, orange, and a little bit of the gold on there. I'm also going to go back in and add that shade of purple that you can see on my palette to add a little bit of cool shadowing to this area as well. I'm going to be working on these berries, and it's always a little tricky when you have similar colors up right next to each other. So I did apply some of the red, but then I went back in with that purple to add a little bit darker cool shadow underneath. With acrylic painting, it's going to dry a little bit darker, so I will let it dry, and then I'll probably be adding more white on the top. Here's the cool shadow areas that I'm adding in. It's just going to add a lot more interest to my whites in the end. And when I actually do add the white on in the very end, it's going to be kind of like glitter. You add just a tiny bit and it's going to show up so much more. I continue on with my block painting, and this is a little bit of holly that's at the top of it. I'm going to start with kind of a bluish green, block my colors in. I'm going to be letting that dry and then coming back in to add my brighter greens on top. I decided I need a little bit more dark color on my beak, so I'm adding in a little bit more golden colors. Again, I'll be adding the bright whites at the very end. Now I'm going to be working on the background and the negative areas, and I'm going to make this bright and colorful. So you're going to see me layer in a bunch of different colors all the way around my painting. You might be noticing I'm not rinsing out my brush in between my colors. I'm just simply picking up more color and applying it onto my paper. I'm blending it out as I go and adding more and more color. This whole style of painting, of blocking in the color, having that brightly colored underpainting, works well for this style of painting. You might notice how I'm getting close to my image on the inside, but you're still seeing some of that bright blue popping through every once in a while. It creates a very interesting and fun, playful background. Acrylic paint does dry quickly, but I am going to give it a chance to dry before I go in and put my final detailing in. This is where I'm going to be bringing my pops of white in. So I'm loading on my white, but I'm also adding just a hint of that purple and any other color that I might want to bring in. You're still going to see those undertones underneath. I'm going to be working on my beak a little bit more, adding a little bit more bright pops of that white color. Now this is where I'm going to bring in some of my brighter greens. Green is another one of those colors, especially in these yellow tones, that can be pretty translucent. So I'm going to be adding in a little white, brushing back and forth, doing that playful dance of adding paint on, letting it dry, and then adding a little bit more. Here I go again, adding another layer. I think I've played around with these berries quite a few times, and I still don't know if I'm quite happy with them. The great thing about acrylic paint is that you can just let it dry and add more layers. There's lots of flexibility and lots of playing around that you can do with acrylic paint. I still need to work on that eye. I haven't started that yet. Once I finish that eye, it's really going to bring it to life. At this stage, I have switched to a smaller brush. I'm using just an inexpensive flat brush. It's kind of scruffy actually. Now with this eye, I'm going to be laying in the green first. I have no idea if flamingos have green eyes, but I know it's a complementary color to the pink and it's going to look great. For the eye area, I even switched down to a smaller brush. Even though I'm wanting loose strokes, I wanted to be able to have a little bit more control over where my paint is going. First, I layered a light green on there, and then I added just a little bit darker around the iris. This is going to help my eye really pop. For the center, I'm going to be using a nice charcoal black color. I still need to be able to add that little catch light into her eye. And once I add the catch light in there, it's really going to bring her to life. All living things have a catch light. As soon as you add that simple little white dot, it does bring them to life. So I'm just going to use the end of my paintbrush and tap it on. Voila, she's come to life. I need to give my painting a good dry because I wanted to add the black to my beak on my flamingo. The beak on the flamingo is very much a strong characteristic of this bird, and if it's slightly off, it just doesn't look like a flamingo. So the curve makes a difference, the coloration adds a difference. It doesn't have to be perfect, but as long as you add that extra darkness to the end of the beak and have the shape right, it's going to look like a flamingo. I come back in and I futz just a little bit more. I pick up a little bit more white, add just a tiny bit to her eyes. I really want to draw attention to that. I'm still messing with those berries. I don't know if I'm happy with them yet, but I'm going to call them done. And here's a close-up look of what it looks like. Final touches. I'm going to add a little bit of that green around the edges, a little bit of my base color, that same blue I started with, just to finish out the edge. And now she's going to be ready to add the little bit of shells to the bottom. I'm going to be using some ribbon from my stash that has a really big open weave to it. It kind of reminds me of a fishing net. I thought this would be a good base to start with. And then I'm going to be laying in some shells that I found at my local thrift store. And some of the shells I'm using today are from our trips to Florida. My husband and I like to usually take a trip to Florida during the winter. We are from Minnesota, so the winters are long and it's always nice to get away to a little bit of Florida sunshine that time of year. I can totally see why people do the snowbird thing. Go away for a little while in the winter and then come back once spring starts. Winters are long here. I always said if winter just lasted as long as it says on the calendar it does, I'd be okay with that. I finally remembered to put that pink finger device on. I can have them sitting right next to me, and for some reason, I still won't put them on. And I even take it off and go back to touch the glue again. I tell you, some habits die hard. I'd like to go ahead and say a special thank you to our hosts today, Krista and Brenda, for putting together today's Christmas in July collaboration. The link is inside of my comments to their channel. You're going to want to make sure you go over and check out their page, as well as the playlist link for today. There's so many creative people in the playlist. I'm sure you're going to be inspired to create something. If you're new to my channel and you enjoy creating art, why don't you stop on over and take a look to see what I have to offer. I have many tutorials on there for drawing, watercolor, painting, all kinds of fun things. If you enjoyed today's video and watching how I put it together, give me a thumbs up. YouTube loves thumbs up, and it really does help push my video out there. I'd so appreciate you doing so. The hot glue is working perfectly to glue my shells on. If I was going to have it in hot heat or someplace where there was a lot of sunlight, I definitely would want to put some E6000 on there to make sure it was going to stick tightly. But this is just going to be hanging in my art room for me to enjoy. I was wanting to add just a fun little element of a surprise element to some of my shells that are open-faced, so I found a pearl necklace at my thrift store and I took it apart and added some pearls inside of some of the shells. I also added just a tish bit of glitter on those pearls just to make them sparkle a little bit more. Another way I was able to add just a tish bit more glitter was with these book paper flowers. They're simple to make. I always have some made up sitting aside just in case I want to add something to a project that I'm doing. They're super simple to make, and the diamond dust really does make them sparkle. Here I'm adding a few more of those little shells with the pearls inside. The surface of the paper plate is kind of unusual to create on, but I do love this shape and I think it's working perfectly to create with. By having that ridge all the way around and a little bit of extra depth, it's almost functioning like a shadow box and working perfectly to layer these items on. That little starfish was a part of a bracelet, another piece I found at my thrift store. I'm just trying to work my way of having some big elements and some medium and then some smaller items. So these little jewelry pieces work perfectly for layering on. It's so nice to live in a town that has a nice variety of thrift stores. You never know what kind of treasures you might find there. I'm going to be adding just this simple little messy bow. I made it from a cotton towel, a cotton kitchen towel. I don't really know how to make fancy bows. This is about as fancy as I get, but it works perfectly for this project. I like how I bring a little bit of that white down to the bottom. And a little bit of extra texture by having it be kind of a shaggy bow look. I like that look too. This is just created from a little bit of a burlap ribbon. I just pulled the twines. Who else keeps the strings from your little extra bitsies? This is from a burlap ribbon. I pull some of them out, keep them aside. I always have a little stash of strings. You never know when you might need them. The pip berries that are on there have a little bit of glitter on it, and I thought that added to a little bit of a Christmas theme to it by just adding a little bit more glimmer. That shell in the middle is so pretty. I love the coloring of it. And here's one last more paper rose just to add a little bit more glitter. Are you finding out that I like glitter? I like glitter, but I don't like glitter. Who else can relate to that? Add a few more shells on, and then I have this greenery that looks like a fern, but it kind of reminds me of some of the things that are in the bottom of an aquarium. So I thought, why not add those too? I felt like I needed another bit of green at that one end, so I thought these would be a nice little filler piece for it. I think I might have gotten these at the Dollar Tree. They're very plasticky and they do melt quite quickly with the hot glue, so I just kind of stick them in there quickly and let it be. I think it's coming together nicely. I like how it's kind of going up on the one edge and down on the other. I never know when to stop though. Let me know in the comments if you think it's way too much or maybe it's just perfect. I'm not for sure. I always question that part. I'm a much better painter than I am a floral arranger. Let me know in the comments if you might be a beach Christmas gal, if you'd rather have your toes in the sand instead of the snow. I think I'd rather have my toes in the sand. Let's see how she all came together. I love this style of painting. The bright pops of color, the very loose brush strokes make for a very fun, playful painting. I hope you enjoyed watching me create this, and you'll come back and see me again, and perhaps next time you'll create along with me.